The first 7 verses of Proverbs contain 7 Hebrew words that the English Bible gets wrong. Not slightly wrong, fundamentally wrong. Each one carries a meaning that the English translation flattens into something safe and familiar. And the moment you see what the Hebrew actually says, you'll never read this book the same way again. Most people treat Proverbs like a box of fortune cookies. You crack one open, read a nice sentence, nod, and move on. But Proverbs 1:1-7 isn't a collection of nice sentences. It's a precise, carefully constructed doorway into the most practical book in the Bible. And the 7 words Solomon uses in that doorway aren't the words your translation gives you. They're sharper, stranger, more demanding. And in at least one case, the Hebrew word Solomon chose is the same word the Bible uses to describe the serpent in Eden. That's not a coincidence. So here's what we're going to do. 7 words. 7 Hebrew concepts the Bible buries under English approximations. Each one changes what you think this book is about. And by the end, you'll understand why Proverbs isn't a book of wisdom quotes. It's a survival manual. There are 7 stops. The word the English Bible calls proverb that actually means something closer to comparison. The word for wisdom that has nothing to do with being smart. The word translated instruction that actually means pain. The word for understanding that literally means between. The word for knowledge that describes something intimate and physical. The word for prudence that also describes the serpent. And the phrase that everyone quotes, the fear of the Lord, that doesn't mean what anybody thinks it means. Let's start with the title of the book itself. Word 1. Mashal. The English Bible says, the Proverbs of Solomon. The Hebrew says, the Meshalim of Solomon. And mashal does not mean proverb, not in the way English uses that word. The root of mashal, and scholars still debate this, which is worth knowing, comes from either to be like or to rule. Both meanings matter. If mashal comes from to be like, then a mashal is a comparison, a likeness, a pattern laid alongside another pattern so you can see the connection between them. If it comes from to rule, then a mashal is a ruling statement, a verdict, the final word on how things actually work. Either way, it's not a fortune cookie. A mashal is a tool for seeing what's hidden in plain sight. It takes 2 things that look unrelated and shows you the thread between them. That's why the same word mashal is used for parables in Ezekiel, for Balaam's oracles in Numbers, for Job's speeches, and for the taunt songs in Isaiah. These are not nice sayings. These are instruments of perception. When Solomon titles his book, The Meshalim of Solomon, he's not saying, here are some wise quotes. He's saying, here are the instruments that will teach you to see the world the way God designed it to be seen. That's a completely different book than the one most people think they're reading. And here's what's fascinating. The plural form, Meshalim, tells you something too. This isn't one proverb. It's a collection of pattern recognition tools designed to be used together. Each mashal trains your eye to see a different pattern. Together, they construct a way of seeing reality. You don't read Proverbs the way you read a devotional. You train with it the way a musician trains with scales. Repetition, recognition, reflex. Word 2, chokmah. Proverbs 1:2. To know wisdom. The Hebrew word is chokmah, and chokmah does not mean wisdom in the way English speakers use that word. In English, wisdom is intellectual. It lives in your head. A wise person knows things. They've read books. They have deep thoughts. Chokmah is not that. Chokmah is skill, physical, practiced, embodied skill. The word shows up 149 times in the Hebrew Bible, and some of the earliest uses have nothing to do with philosophy. Exodus 31:3. God fills Bezalel with chokmah for the work of designing the tabernacle. Exodus 35:26. The women who spun goat hair for the tent curtains are described as having chokmah. These aren't philosophers. They're craftspeople. Their hands know things their minds couldn't articulate. That's what chokmah means. It's the skill of living well, the craft of making good decisions under pressure, the practiced ability to read a situation and respond correctly, not because you memorized a rule, but because you've done it enough times that your instincts have been shaped by reality. Solomon isn't offering you a book of ideas. He's offering you a training manual for a skill, and skills don't come from reading. They come from repetition, correction, and practice. Think about what that means for how you approach this book. You don't read Proverbs for information. You practice Proverbs for formation. The same way a woodworker doesn't read about joints. He cuts joints over and over until his hands know what his mind can't explain. Chokmah is that kind of knowing, and it's the word Solomon chose to describe the entire purpose of his book, which brings us directly to the next word. And this one is the reason most people don't stick with Proverbs long enough for it to change them. Word 3. Musar. Same verse, Proverbs 1:2. To know wisdom and instruction. That word, instruction, is musar, and musar does not mean instruction. Musar means discipline, correction, chastisement. It's the word used in Jeremiah 30:14 when God says, "I have struck you with the discipline of a cruel one." It's the word used in Proverbs 23:13. Do not withhold musar from a child. It carries the weight of a father correcting a son who is about to walk off a cliff. Not gently suggesting, correcting. The root of musar is yasar, which means to chasten, to admonish, to instruct through consequence. Picture a sculptor with a chisel. The marble doesn't become a statue through encouragement. It becomes a statue through removal. The chisel cuts away what doesn't belong. That process is musar. So when Solomon says this book will teach you chokmah and musar, he's saying something your English translation softens beyond recognition. He's saying this book will train you in the skill of living, and the training will involve correction. It'll hurt. Not because the teacher is cruel, but because the raw material, you, still has pieces that need to be cut away. This is not a gentle book. It never was. Word 4. Bina. Still in verse 2. To understand the words of understanding. The Hebrew is bina. And here's the part most people miss. Bina comes from the root bayin, which means between. Bina is not comprehension. It's not grasping a concept intellectually. Bina is the ability to distinguish between two things, to see the difference where other people see sameness, to look at two paths that seem identical and recognize that one leads to life and the other leads to ruin. This matters because the entire structure of Proverbs is built on contrasts: wisdom versus folly, the righteous versus the wicked, Lady Wisdom versus the forbidden woman, the path of life versus the path of death. The whole book is organized around pairs of opposites, and binah is the faculty that lets you tell them apart. Without binah, the two paths look the same. Both are attractive. Both promise reward. Both have voices calling you toward them. Binah is the trained eye that spots the difference before it's too late. And notice the connection to chokmah. Chokmah is the skill of living well. Binah is the perceptual acuity that makes that skill possible. You can't practice the craft if you can't see the material clearly. Binah gives you eyes. Chokmah gives you hands. Word 5. Da'at. Proverbs 1:4. To give the young man knowledge and discretion. The word for knowledge is da'at, and da'at is not information. Da'at comes from the verb yada, and yada is one of the most intimate words in the Hebrew language. Genesis 4:1. Adam knew Yada, his wife Eve, and she conceived. This is not intellectual knowledge. This is experiential, relational, embodied knowing. You know something in Hebrew the way you know a person, through encounter, through presence, through shared experience over time. When Solomon says this book gives da'at to the young, he's not saying it gives them facts. He's saying it gives them the kind of knowledge that comes from close contact with reality. The kind of knowledge that scars you and shapes you. The kind you carry in your body, not just your brain. This is why Proverbs 1:7 uses da'at as the thing that comes from fearing God. Not information about God, but intimate acquaintance with who God is. You don't get da'at from reading a textbook. You get it from standing in the presence of something real. Word 6, and this one is the strangest of all. Ormah. Proverbs 1:4. To give prudence to the simple. The Hebrew word translated prudence or subtlety is ormah, and the root of ormah is arum, Now, open your Bible to Genesis 3:1. The serpent was more crafty than any other beast of the field. The word for crafty there is arum. Same root, same word family. Solomon is saying this book will teach you orma, the very quality the serpent used in Eden. Sit with that for a second. The biblical tradition doesn't shy away from this. Orma in a negative context means cunning, deception, manipulation, the ability to scheme and exploit. Orma in a positive context means shrewdness, strategic intelligence, the ability to navigate a dangerous and complex world without getting destroyed by it. Solomon isn't teaching naive goodness. He's teaching you to be shrewd. He wants you to understand how manipulation works so you're not a victim of it. He wants you to see through the flattery, the false promises, the seductive voice that sounds wise but leads to death. Proverbs 1:10-19, the very first extended teaching after the introduction, is about recognizing a trap. My son, if sinners entice you, do not consent. That's orma at work. You recognize the serpent's voice because you've been trained to hear it. The English word prudence erases all of this. It makes the concept sound cautious and mild. Orma is not mild. It's the difference between a sheep and a shepherd. The sheep is innocent. The shepherd is shrewd. Solomon is training shepherds. And notice what he says in verse 4. To give orma to the simple. The word for simple there is piti, from the root pata, which means to be wide open, easily deceived, gullible. Solomon is specifically targeting people who are vulnerable to being conned. And his prescription isn't just be good. His prescription is learn to think like the serpent so the serpent can't think for you. That's a radically different Proverbs than the one most people read. Word 7. Yirat Yahweh. Proverbs 1:7. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge. This is the most famous verse in Proverbs. It's quoted in sermons constantly. And almost every time somebody has to stop and explain. Now, fear here doesn't really mean fear. But that's not quite right either. The Hebrew word is yirah. And yirah carries a range of meaning that English can't hold in one word. It includes terror. It includes reverence. It includes awe. It includes the physical sensation of standing at the edge of something vastly larger than yourself, the way you feel at the rim of the Grand Canyon, or in the presence of a thunderstorm that shakes your whole house. Yirah is what happens when a finite creature encounters the infinite. It's not cowering in fear of punishment. It's the involuntary response of a small being in the presence of an overwhelming one. Your chest tightens, your knees give, your categories break open. You realize in your bones, not in your theology, that you are not the center of reality. Something else is, and that something is both beautiful and terrifying at the same time. Isaiah experienced it in the temple. Smoke, shaking, seraphim crying, "Holy, holy, holy." And his first response was, "Woe is me, I am undone." Moses experienced it at the burning bush and hid his face. Peter experienced it after the miraculous catch of fish and said, "Depart from me, for I am a sinful man." None of them were afraid of being punished. All of them were overwhelmed by proximity to something their categories couldn't contain. Psalm 111:10 says the same thing. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. But the word for beginning here, reshit, doesn't just mean starting point. Reshit means the first principle, the foundation, the controlling reality from which everything else flows. It's the same word used in Genesis 1:1. Bereshit. In the beginning. The fear of the Lord isn't step 1 of a 12-step program. It's the ground under the entire building. So when Solomon says Yirat Yahweh is the reshit of da'at, the foundational reality of all intimate knowledge, he's making a claim that reorganizes everything. He's saying you will never truly know anything, not wisdom, not skill, not discernment, not shrewdness, not understanding, until you have stood in the presence of something that made you realize how small you are. That's not a platitude. That's a philosophical framework, and every single proverb in the next 30 chapters is built on it. Now look at what Solomon has done. In 7 verses, using 7 words, he has constructed an entire curriculum. And it's not the curriculum your English translation shows you. The English version says, "Here are some wise sayings. They'll make you smart and careful. Being good starts with respecting God." The Hebrew says something far more demanding. It says, "Here are the instruments that will teach you to see hidden patterns. They will train you in the craft of living well, and the training will be painful because you have pieces that need cutting away. You'll develop the ability to distinguish between what looks good and what is good. You'll gain intimate, embodied knowledge, the kind that marks you. You'll learn to think like the serpent so the serpent can't deceive you. And none of this will work unless you start by standing in the presence of something that makes you realize you are not God." That's Proverbs 1:1-7 in Hebrew. And that's a completely different book than the one most people think they're holding. One more thing, and this is the part I keep coming back to. Look at the order Solomon chose. He doesn't start with the fear of the Lord. He saves it for verse 7. He starts with mashal, the tool. Then he moves to chokmah, the skill. Then musar, the pain. Then binah, the perception. Then da'at, the intimacy. Then ormah, the shrewdness. And only after all 6 of those does he say, "And none of it works without yirat Yahweh." He builds the house first. He lets you see every room. And only at the end does he show you the foundation. Because the point isn't that you start with fear and then learn wisdom. The point is that you can learn all 6 of those skills. You can master the craft, endure the discipline, develop the perception, gain the knowledge, think like the serpent, and without the fear of the Lord, the whole building collapses. I have studied this chapter for years, and that structural choice still stops me. Solomon doesn't lead with the foundation. He leads with the building, and then he pulls back the curtain and shows you what's holding it all up. Because he knows that if you see the foundation first, you'll think it's just another religious platitude. But if you see the building first, if you see the 6 skills he's offering, and then realize that none of them work without standing in the presence of the infinite, the fear of the Lord stops being a cliché and starts being the most practical statement in the entire book. That's the genius of Proverbs 1. And your English translation hides almost all of it. 7 verses, 7 words. Each one a doorway into a concept your translation couldn't hold. And together they form something no other book in the Bible gives you. A complete framework for how to live in a world that's trying to fool you at every turn. So what do you do with this? 3 things. First, go back and read Proverbs 1:1-7 again. Slowly. And this time, replace each English word with the Hebrew concept. Not Proverbs, meshalim, instruments of perception. Not wisdom, chokmah, the craft of living. Not instruction, musar, the discipline that cuts away what doesn't belong. Not understanding, bina, the ability to distinguish between. Not knowledge, da'at, intimate encounter. Not prudence, orma, the shrewdness of the serpent turned toward good. Not fear, yirah, the awe of standing before the infinite. Read it again with those words. It's a different book. Second, every time you read a proverb from here on, ask yourself, what is this mashal trying to show me? What hidden pattern is it revealing? What comparison is it drawing? Because proverbs aren't instructions. They're lenses. They train your eyes to see what's already there. Third, and this is the one that stays with me, take Solomon's structural hint seriously. He puts the foundation last. Not because it matters least, but because it matters most. Yirat Yahweh, standing in the presence of the infinite with awe and trembling, isn't the starting line. It's the ground beneath every step. If you skip it, you're walking on air. If this study meant something to you, like the video, subscribe, and leave a comment. Even one word tells me which of these 7 hit you hardest, and it helps other people find this content. Click the next video where we studied what heaven actually looks like according to the Bible, and it connects directly to what we just saw here. Because the God whose presence makes your knees buckle is also the God who promises to move in next door. Thank you for studying with me. God bless you.